You are listening to Abnormal Spaces.
I'm Donnie.
I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we discuss conceptual realities, the researchers, authors, and explorers who describe and define them, as well as our personal experiences in these abnormal spaces. In this episode, we discuss the inventions of Georges Lakhovsky, such as the multiple wave oscillator, which cured his father's quadriplegia, his theories on cellular energies, and the mysterious circumstances regarding his death shortly after immigrating to the United States. We have talked about a lot of different things that kind of led me to this inventor named Georges Lakhovsky. Is it Georges? It has an S in the end.
You know, I was saying that to myself this morning. We can say George because
we're American.
Because we're from Evansville.
That's right. We're just going to do it American style.
Old George Lakhovsky. Yeah.
One of the things that's really interesting, we've talked about electroculture before, and that's one of the ways that Lakhovsky got into some of his research. He's born in Russia, in Minsk, moved to France. I think he was a teenager whenever he moved there. Also, really interesting, he was born 1869 or 1870. I'm not totally sure because I've seen different years and different publications about him. But anyway, he's a contemporary of, like Tesla. Dr. Royal Raymond Rife was born shortly after Lakhovsky. So, there are all these inventors and researchers working with electricity, just trying to figure out how they can make the world better and what they can do with electricity. So Lakhovsky goes to France, and at that time, there were quite a few French farmers that were experimenting with electroculture. So Lakhovsky made this copper coil, and he did this test. They inoculated 4 geranium plants with a type of cancer that affects plants, and maybe specifically geraniums. That part I'm not sure, but I know that it is a cancer specific to plants. So they had these 4 plants, and one of them, Lakhovsky put this copper coil around. So there was a rod that went into the soil, and then there was a coil that went around and didn't connect. So it left it open. What ended up happening was really amazing. The geranium continued to grow, and it had a visible tumor on the outside of it. And these other geraniums ended up dying. This one not only continued to grow, but eventually it just dropped the tumor. Just dropped it right off, and it was done. So that happens, and Lakhovsky's in now. He's like, okay, we're going to figure out everything we can about this. So then he went into research mode and started working on electrifying. So he started with just a copper coil with no electricity added, and then began doing different experiments. He was also really interested in waves and how waves worked, whether they're electrical waves or sonic waves or what kind of waves they are. And I think it's interesting, by leaving that coil open that was around the geranium, when a natural vibration or an energy wave would travel around, it would hit that end and then it would come back as an inverse wave. And so there's all of this vibration and this harnessing of energy passively around the plant itself.
It was a capacitor.
Yeah, it was a capacitor. Yeah. Exactly. And because of what Tesla was doing at the time, working with spark gaps and the coils, he began to work with that. His father was he a paraplegic or
I think he was a Wasn't he a quadriplegic?
Yeah, maybe it was a quadriplegic. He was in the hospital in France, and Lakhovsky had developed this multi-wave oscillator. And the thought process behind it was your cells vibrate at whatever frequency they vibrate at. However, different cells vibrate at different frequencies. So he thought if you could tune the cells to get them to their optimum frequency, then they would repel pathogens and be stronger and more able to ward off those types of things. So he thought, well, let's do multiple waves. That way you can target all of the cells, and then the ones that need the specific vibrations will pick up on those because there are all these multiple
The
waves.
law of resonance.
Yes, exactly. It's just like the tuning forks or anything else. You'll get a sympathetic vibration if you hit that correct frequency. He decided, let's do as many frequencies as possible at the same time so that we can better target the individual cells so all of them can benefit, not just the ones that are out of whack, more of a holistic approach, like to help all of the cells. So his father's in the hospital, and he brings in his multi-wave oscillator every day and has his father positioned in between these two discs, basically. They're like discs. I'll have Ryan kind of explain what they look like and how they function a little better than me. But anyway, he sits between it, and they do this day in, day out for 6 or 8 weeks or however long it was. And there was a marked improvement. In fact, he was able to walk out of the hospital on crutches, but still, he was a quadriplegic before. And in 2 months' time, he's able to leave the hospital. And everyone's like, well, I guess he cured him. And so then he actually founded a company and began producing these. This was in the 30s in France. And people that are aware of history will know what comes next for Europe. In 1939, that company folded. They had to stop because the war was really raging at that point. But the coils, I call them coils. They're really not coils. That's a wrong
antenna.
Yeah, antenna. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because they're open on one end and closed on the other, and it's concentric rings. It's something you'll just have to see. But there's concentric rings, and the openings are opposite of one another on each ring. That creates multiple capacitance, and there is a question about what was inside the copper rings. So some people thought they were full of noble gas, argon or something like that. Other people just thought, it was hollow. We don't really know for sure. And Lakhovsky's patents were very vague, and that was on purpose, twofold. One, he was still experimenting, so he wanted to make it pretty broad so that when he finally figured out exactly what worked the best, it would be covered under his patent. The other reason is when he went to get the patents in the United States, at that time, it made a lot more sense to just make it as broad and vague as possible so that he was covered. That's why it's hard to replicate these today, because the patents themselves aren't really the design plan. They're not really the schematics. But he had a lot of things patented. He had these bulbs that were kind of like tubes, and they had coils inside them.
Yeah, that was before the multi-wave oscillator.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was before.
He was taking the passive idea, the capacitor antenna, which is, they just call it a Lakhovsky coil. It just works with natural cosmic radiation, which is amazing by itself. They actually made those as belts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you could purchase these belts from Lakhovsky. People would wear them around their waist, around their neck, their chest, and it works. I haven't seen a crazy amount of his science on that, but it's really simple to do. I mean, you can literally take a piece of copper wire and whatever circumference your waist is, wrap it around that, and then imagine a whole circle, and then imagine an inch or two just snipped out of it. So it looks like a C ring, but they're not touching. That's basically what one of these antennae look like. That creates the capacitance. You can just go to the store and get a wire with insulation on it.
Yeah.
So this technology is really easy to use. It's really something good to experiment with. It's really cheap. Start Googling Lakhovsky coils, Lakhovsky belts, and you can build them yourself for nothing. and they can potentially really help you out with your energy levels and your healing if you have a problem. But anyway, so that was the first one. Then he went to the tubes, and he was like, "Oh, well, if I can do this here, I can do this in a vacuum tube, and the
Yeah.
vacuum is gonna whatever." But then he bypassed that pretty quick and started going to the concentric ring antenna. So it's basically the same idea as his original passive antenna, only he made, concentric rings, what it looks like. It's like big, smaller, 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 all the way into the middle, right? And the open part of the ring, they opposed. The first one pointed up towards the sky. The next inner level pointed down towards the ground. And they were suspended by silk thread to give them the maximum amount of vibration, whatever, I'm just trying to describe the machine. It basically consists of 2 Tesla coils that connected to these concentric ring antennas. And you sit in between these, and one antenna basically shot the frequencies out. You could hold a piece of metal and you could see the arc of like a 6-inch arc.
Yeah.
The other one does that too, but it's because it's catching.
Yeah.
And they're tuned.
Right.
So they're resonant with each other.
Yep.
So basically the whole idea is there is a range up to the gigahertz range, basically. When you start going above that, it starts to be like harmful to tissue.
Right.
Or ionizing radiation. So this is non-ionizing radiation. This is actually beneficial. And his theory, what you said, is basically every single cell in the body has an optimal voltage. It's 70 microvolts or 70 millivolts. This is some science shit. So like you can look it up. It's real.
It's well documented.
Yeah, well documented. And he theorized that disease happens as we age and as we're exposed to these toxins and all of these stresses and problems that our body just naturally goes through that we don't pay attention to, especially now. We're in crazy land right now.
Right.
It creates a disharmony, and then the voltage starts to drop. Well, he noticed that when the voltage dropped to about 20 is when major disease started to set in, like cancers and things like that. And going back to his dad being a quadriplegic, he probably used that principle, and he's like, so I'm bathing you in this shower of frequencies from 1 hertz with harmonics.
Yeah, and subharmonics.
And subharmonics, because the spark, it has everything in it. The spark gap has all of the harmonics in it, everything. But the antenna focused it down into a broad band of beneficial harmonics. And so every single cell in your body could pick it out through resonance, whatever it wanted in there. And you just sat between these things and you sat on a wooden chair, took all the metal off of you. It's amazing technology. I can't believe that it was actually a thing that happened.
Yeah.
How do these people think of this stuff?
I know. I wonder that all the time. Like, what was going on? And like, how few distractions they must have had, or, how much of it was just the pursuit of knowledge was celebrated at that time. And people wanted to better themselves and learn more about the world around them.
Lakhovsky, he had some kind of contact with Tesla.
Yes. Yeah.
You said that already?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, it was, I don't know if they like wrote some letters back and forth or what, but something like that.
From what I understand, and I don't know if this is just for the violet ray, because the violet ray we talked about before is like, it's a very small multi-wave oscillator, basically. It doesn't operate on the same frequency. It's not as powerful, obviously, but the principle is absolutely the same. except for the antenna. And me being an insane person, I bought these violet rays, even if they weren't operating correctly, as long as the base was operating correctly. And I took some brass and I made this point. And I actually found a company that had circuit board printed concentric antenna rings. They had holes in it with metal, and if you could cap it and feed it into there, you could actually see the arcing between the antenna.
Oh, cool.
I'll show you sometime.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And actually, if you bring the fluorescent light bulb, which is the best test for it,
Yeah.
even from that, it was about 12 to 16 inches would light up that bulb
Oh, wow.
at almost a full power. And you could only run that thing for about 10 minutes, but the proof of it was, I mean, you could literally sit in front of that with your chest
Yeah.
and gain major benefit from it.
Yeah, that's wild. I loved all of the different videos I saw where people did the light they showed
Yeah.
you. And then I watched one where they had this strip of LEDs. I guess they were LEDs. I don't know. But since it was a line of them, they were able to show just how far the field actually was. I thought that was cool. I saw images of the aurora that comes off of it, or the corona or whatever. Effluva. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for, which was really amazing. But the idea that you can sit in this field and get this electrical bath, and the fact that it's more than just electricity. I think that's another thing that ended up happening. People were like, electricity is old news.
Right.
Now everyone's got electricity. I'm like, okay, but that was just one part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the resonance, it's the vibration, it's
Harmonic,
it's harmonic frequencies, you know, all the stuff we talk about. That's another reason why I wanted to kind of look at Lakhovsky a little bit more, because it's a lot of the things we talk about, but in one device. That multi-wave oscillator really is kind of a proof of all of the concepts that all of these other people had come up with.
I've been wanting a multi-wave oscillator for at least 10 years.
Yeah.
I have all of the documentation to build a certified replica. I paid for it. I emailed back and forth with Bruno Sacco in Italy. Those are the guys that found the 3 models.
Oh, that were still created? Yeah.
And I have their PDF books. They took them all apart, did all of these oscilloscope tests. I mean, they did everything.
Wow.
And they replicated one of their own, and it's exactly the same to spec. If there's anybody out there that is really, really smart and would like to build a multi-wave oscillator, let's talk.
Yeah.
But I've thought about it, and there are companies now that are making, there's only a few, maybe even like 2 or 3 that are actually doing the real work of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of knockoffs.
Yeah.
You'll see so much bullshit.
Yeah. That's what I found. And when I was looking, I saw all this stuff, and the spark gap, super important to get all those harmonic frequencies. And there was one manufacturer that's like, instead of a spark gap, we use, and I'm like, well, that's out.
Right.
That's not, you're not doing it. You know?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that like there's something that couldn't work, you know, to an extent. But if you really want to go whole hog on it, you know, I watched a video on YouTube, and it was just this French guy, like, I don't know how it popped up. He's just in France at his house, and he built one because he got the same book that I bought. He was like, okay, so it was all, you know, subtitled and everything, but he's like, so I built my own, and he went through it and showed, and he just used like a variac, and he did some really novel stuff because he was a really smart guy, but he did make the concentric ring antennas, which are actually might be the hardest part.
Yeah. Because you got to get them perfect.
Well, yeah, and the bending of them and the brazing of the ball ends and all of that stuff. It's just so time consuming, and you have to know kind of what you're doing. But he actually came up with a really cool way. He had a mold routed in wood, and he would just put the copper in that was a malleable copper, and he would just bend it around that and make his concentric rings.
That's smart.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I even emailed that guy because I was just like, I was trying to find any information about, you know, who else to talk to. I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I'm just spouting out some information if you guys want to just look at it. There's a company called Vril, VRIL.
Yeah, I saw that guy.
Yeah, those guys really took it to the future. They work with Eric Dollard, and Eric Dollard worked with Bob Beck and a lot of people back in the day. This guy's a genius. He invented the circuit board printed antenna that I was talking about. He worked with them to actually make their version of it, which is actually, it's a little bit more portable. They have a printed circuit board antenna you can use, but they also have the Big Daddy nice antenna. It'll cost you, I think it's about, 15 to 20 grand for that machine.
Yeah.
But I'll say, man, if you could get enough people together
Right.
and just go in on one of these machines and have it just be open to, your group, and, you should be pretty secretive about it still. I mean, I'm a little paranoid about this stuff, but like, you don't want people getting better going to a place. People start asking questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then everybody wants to go, and then that's when weird things start happening.
That's when the lawyers show up.
For real. Or like a man in black.
Right.
Like, I don't want that.
Right. One of the things that happens is ozone is created.
Yep.
And we all know how beneficial ozone is.
Yep.
So let's say that you don't buy into cellular voltage, even though it's well documented. And let's say you don't buy into cells vibrating at independent frequencies, and say you skip all that. You have to know that ozone, what it can do is eliminate a lot of harmful pathogens, etc. So just sitting in there and being bathed in freshly made ozone, I mean, that's got to help right there.
Yeah.
Let alone all of the subharmonic frequencies, and the oscillotherapy, because essentially that's what you're doing. You're getting the vibrations back to their optimum state. So I'm like, I don't see a reason why this wouldn't work. I don't have enough evidence or anything to compel me to believe it wouldn't. I did see a guy, a researcher, and he was just using the pre-printed antenna. And honestly, I think he made his own, because I've seen some of the other ones, and this one looked a little amateurish. But anyway, he had some kind of spectral analysis thing, and he was able to show that just this small coil, it was separate from the antenna, but the antenna was, 6 to 8 inches, maybe 12 inches away from the coil. He was able to demonstrate that not only did it boost as far as the amount of energy, but you could see all of the additional harmonics and subharmonics being created. So he did it without the antenna and with the antenna. And
I think I saw that video, yeah.
The proof is there. He played it down a little. He's like, well, this isn't as much as they said it would be. And I was like, well, yeah, but you're not doing as much as originally designed or intended.
Absolutely.
However, you can see it. You can see it right on the computer screen.
And let's also talk about the minimal electrical requirements of the human organism or the animal organism to function.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Right.
Us being humans, we think we need more power.
Because more is always better.
Right. No. Yeah, this is a thing of resonance. It's not a thing of, it is a thing of power to a degree, but it's a thing of resonance more than anything. Otherwise, the passive antenna wouldn't have worked.
Right.
And it's not placebo because plants don't believe.
Right. Yeah.
So when people do these tests to try to debunk, and they're not using like an actual machine or an actual replica, it's hard to really go off of that too.
Right.
Just using the dimensions of the antenna. And actually, he went through different types of antennas where he used all copper. He used different metals, like he would alternate copper, metal, aluminum.
I saw that one.
Yeah. And then I think the ones in the last years were just all aluminum tubes.
Yep.
I don't think that played into it as much. It's all putting out the same sort of bath of...
Well, that, and they were so enamored with copper in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So, and I love the way copper looks, just, visually. But anyway, so they always went to that as like the go-to, and that made you look more legitimate, if you had copper as opposed to aluminum. I will say that anytime there's dirt involved, I think copper is probably the choice. However, he was able to show that even aluminum worked basically just the same.
I've been fascinated with this ever since I saw it, and it was a long time ago. And I tried to do everything to figure out how to make one. You can do it. You just have to know what you're doing in a certain way, and you have to be able to get certain pieces. Like I think one of them's a neon sign transformer. You can buy those, but it has to be of a certain like kilovolt. I mean, and you can, but you have to build certain parts. You need to know how to make a spark gap, and you can make one with a tungsten metal, and you can make a little mechanical thing that makes it go further away and closer together to make it stronger. And, and I've looked at all that, it's just a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a lot of time and more precision than I think, I think some of these people have kind of done shortcuts.
Yeah, totally.
And if I was going to do it, I would want to do it the way Lakhovsky did it.
I do follow some groups of people who actually build these things, and they've come up with really novel ways of making really nice spark gaps where you don't have to like machine stuff and you don't have to do all this stuff. You can kind of like, you can make a good one.
Yeah.
Or you can kind of buy a good one too.
Yeah. If you got the money.
Yeah. Yeah. If you got the money. I'm not going to get into Bob Beck, but Bob Beck and Eric Dollard, they found one of these things way back when. And they did all these tests on it, and he had an engineer named Ed Skilling. He was like a radio engineer, and he knew, they all were. And they did all these tests and the same kind of things, and they figured out like what it was doing. So they all kind of split off into their little things, like Eric Dollard like went his way with the printed circuit board things, and Bob Beck taught you how to make one with a neon sign transformer and like a Ford starting coil and a spark plug and like for the spark gap. And I mean, these machines worked,
Yeah.
But they were smaller versions and they weren't the big thing. But then Ed Skilling worked with it so much that he goes, you don't need the antenna.
Oh, okay.
He goes, it's just a spark gap.
Huh. Interesting.
And he proved in a lot of ways that it was just the spark gap. So he created this thing called the photon genie or some shit like that. And it actually had glass tubes that had noble gases in them. It also had these things that were connected to it that he called a RF, like a radio frequency flat pack.
Okay.
It used a spark gap in the machinery, and it also transmitted it to the flat pack that you wore on yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, so he went in that direction with it, and he's like, yeah, you don't even need all this crazy stuff. Like it works the same.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he's just crazy, smart, genius guy too,
Was he part of the Borderland Science?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those guys were.
Those guys are incredible.
Yeah, I have a lot of Borderlands books here, or manuals that they put out.
They go back quite a ways too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Super
50s,
far.
I think. Yeah, 40s or 50s or whatever.
And there's some wild shit in there, man. Like, I think the one with Lakhovsky it was one with Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah.
And these people who are experimenters, they came up with this chimney pipe, maybe about 8 inches around, and it was filled with organic metal, like
Oh, okay. Yeah,
yeah,
like the orgone.
The orgone generator.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a piece of copper going all the way through it to the base. They set it in the corner of their house, and people were just experiencing all kinds of fucking weird phenomena from this thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like the whole living room or wherever they had put this, people would go in there and just get high vibratory, like buzzing, and there were like feelings of things, and there were things and if you go, the closer you went to it, and if you would touch it, you'd get this like sensation, like this crazy, almost like voltage spike. Yeah, and it was just passing.
That's what's so interesting to me is that the stuff exists here on the earth, and if you assemble it in a certain way, you get all of these benefits.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything other than put it in the right order. essentially.
Electroculture.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the same
It's
thing.
the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. So if someone's sitting in between the antenna for the multi-wave oscillator, do the feet have to be barefoot? Do they have to be on a metal plate? Do you have to do anything to like ground yourself or anything like that?
There was a metal plate for grounding at one point, but then it was not needed.
They
I don't
realized,
think.
yeah.
There's actually a diagram. It's like a thermal image of how it goes through the body and where it goes. And it's
Interesting.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
Lakhovsky, he published 4 books, 3 of which were more like health and biological related. One of those 3 was all about the multi-wave oscillator. That was published in 1926. But in 1939, he published a book about racism. Essentially, he was like, you can't be a civil society with these racist tendencies or whatever. And I think that was just a response to what was going on in Europe in 1939. He moved to the United States, to New York in 1939. He passed away shortly after immigrating here. And the only account I could find was that he was hit by a car. So I don't know if that's true, and I don't know exactly how he died, et cetera. Like I said, there's already some ambiguity on the year he was born. Not really sure there. But I do find it kind of interesting that he gets his patents approved, and they're however vague they are. He comes here, and then a car takes him out. It just, you have to wonder.
Bob Beck died, they said of heart issues. If you watch videos of this guy, he was like healthy as a horse because of all this stuff he was using. Actually, he didn't have any hair. He was using this technology and he grew his hair back.
Oh, wow.
I mean, like fully.
Wow.
And it's crazy, man. You look at pictures, he was like diabetic and he was like overweight and all this stuff. And then when he's speaking in these things, like he's skinny, he looks very healthy. He's not diabetic anymore. And he has a full head of hair. It's like,
wow.
He's using the technology that he's promoting and he's telling you how to build it.
Right. Yeah. He's not trying
selling
to
it.
That's the thing.
They took him out. This is my opinion. They took him out. They took Wilhelm Reich out.
Yeah.
They took Royal Reich out. Anybody who has stumbled upon something that could affect the human race profoundly has been just wiped off the map.
They're eliminated, and then all of the research is quackified. It does seem sometimes like a concerted effort, and it's not too far of a leap. And you look at like what happened to Tesla, he wasn't offed or anything, but he was made destitute. So, I look at the results, I look at what I understand, and granted, my understanding is somewhat limited. I'm not educated in these fields formally, but I see the evidence and I see the theory that I can understand, and I just have to say, why not? I mean, there isn't a reason for me to believe it doesn't work, and there are more compelling reasons to believe that it does work. And okay, so the violet wand, I think it's really cool and interesting, but I see the limitations, and I see where the multi-wave oscillator with the large antenna is an improvement upon that. It's not so focused. It has more energy. It seems to affect more of the cells. I would take all this and I'm like, I think all of these guys were onto something.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's more than a coincidence. All you have to do is just look at them in a row.
Yeah.
And look at the time period. It's all the same kind of time period.
Yeah. Right.
And also look at what they did to, Wilhelm Reich and like how they burned all of his.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like if they did that to one person, what makes you think that they didn't do it to everybody?
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
And then you see where the industry went after that. So again, heavy into polymers, plastics, chemicals, etc. Once they found a way to really charge people money for distribution of electricity, etc., that's what they did. And then, these regulations and whatnot that were added to keep the small independent people from being able to compete. I mean, it takes so much funding just to do the research. And it just really seems like a concentration of the power, and not meaning electricity, but, influence. It seems like a concentration for the wealthy. And I feel like that's why some of this has been quackified. And I know that's easy to say and that's conspiratorial thinking, but time after time, person after person, all in the same kind of, couple of decades,
It's too much.
It's too much.
Too much, especially that's the same time where all the pharmaceutical stuff and all this stuff was coming out.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it only makes sense.
Yeah, it was like a battle.
Yeah.
And, surprise, the wealthy won.